As a pastor of Westlake, I have to talk to you about something incredibly serious. I think we're all thinking about the future at the moment that lies beyond this current COVID crisis. And what I have to tell you is that the situation that faces us as a congregation is not what kind of future Westlake has, but in fact, whether Westlake as a church has a future. We are currently facing the most serious financial situation that I've faced in 25 years in church leadership and that we have ever faced as a congregation. Now, before I tell you a little bit more in depth about that financial situation and what we're doing to address it, I want to talk to you about our responsibility as God's people when it comes to giving. And that's because we need to approach this situation not simply as if we were donors giving to an organisation, but as disciples who are called to support the mission of God through the local church. If I could sum up everything that the Bible says about our responsibility for supporting the church, it would be this. I would say it under three headings. The first one is quite simply that God's work is supported by God's people. That's what you see in the Old Testament and the New Testament. In the Old Testament, God's people gave to support the ministry and work of the temple. And in the New Testament, the ministry and work of the local church, we are told in the letters of the New Testament, is the responsibility of God's people. So that's the first thing. It's our responsibility as disciples of Jesus Christ to be not simply consumers of the ministry and the work of the local church, but to be contributors to it. And that applies particularly in the realm of finance. The next thing is that we could sum up the rest of what the New Testament says about giving by saying always a proportion and sometimes a sacrifice. In the Old Testament, people gave a tithe, which was a proportion of their income in the Old Testament, 10%, and they gave that regularly to support the work of God's people. In the New Testament, we see the same principle. We're not told that we have to give 10%, but what we are very definitely told is that we are to regularly give a proportion of our income to the work of the church. And so in 1 Corinthians 16, it says, on the first day of the week, if each of you should set aside a sum of money in keeping with your income, that is to support the work of the church. What I need to tell you is that part of the reason that we are in the current serious financial situation that we're in is because not enough of the people who attend Westlake Church give a regular proportion of their income to the work of the church. Currently, 80% of our income comes from just 30 giving units, which may be individuals, couples, or families. And that means that too many of us are not supporting the work of the church on a regular, ongoing basis for us to be a sustainable congregation. The second thing is, if it's always a proportion, it's sometimes a sacrifice. In the Old Testament, there are tithes and offerings. So as we spoke about earlier, the tithe is that proportionate, regular part of giving, and offering was money given on special occasion in special circumstances that was sacrificial, that went beyond the normal part of giving. And again, we see the same pattern in the New Testament. Speaking about the Macedonian Christians, Paul says that they were given as much as they were able, actually always a proportion part, and then they gave even beyond their ability, the sacrificial part of giving. There is no doubt, right at the moment, we are currently in sometimes a sacrifice type of a situation that's going to require us to give sacrificially to the work of God. So what I want to do is just give you a little bit more detail about the financial situation that we face at the moment. Currently, depending on how we put together our financial obligations, we have a monthly shortfall in our income of between 7 and 10,000 Swiss francs. Now, to put that in its most stark terms, what that means is that unless the situation is changed around, Westlake will cease to exist as a church come September. The leadership of the church, the executive board, and the elders have been working to address this situation. Firstly, our budget has been reviewed and all extraneous costs have been cut out. Secondly, there is ongoing work to restructure our overall expenditure and specifically to reduce our monthly expenditure on fixed costs. And so at the moment, we will be approaching La Fraternelle and their landlords at the hub to explain to them our financial predicament and also to see if we can negotiate a significant reduction to the rental costs that we currently incur on a monthly basis. Finally, the leadership of the church has had to formulate some contingency plans to drastically further cut our costs, and these will be implemented if we don't turn around the situation quickly. They include being unable to continue to support our overseas mission partners, discontinuing our support for local mission projects, and cutting staff salaries and eventually staff positions. The leadership of the church is clear that we need to try and survive until Christmas, and then beyond that, we have to restructure our finances if we wish Westlake to have a long-term sustainable future. We want to be upfront and honest with you and tell you that the result of that may be that the Westlake of the future will be different in significant ways from what it was in the past. We may well have to discontinue using the La Fraternelle facility and find an alternative, cheaper but less convenient location. And there may be changes to the way we offer pastoral care and ministries if we have to lose staff positions. I hope I've conveyed to you these two things, that we are facing a very serious situation and that the leadership of the church is doing everything they can to address those immediate and long-term problems. And so now I need to ask you, as the people of Westlake, if you are willing to do your part. I read this recently where someone wrote about the church. Nothing on earth has greater potential to change lives and carry out God's kingdom work in your community than your local church. There is nothing like the local church when it's working right. I believe that with all my heart. I've given my life to that vision of the local church. And I don't just believe that about the local church in general. I believe that specifically about us as a local church. I believe that our mission and ministry is vitally needed among the English-speaking people of this area, and more so after this crisis is over than perhaps ever before. So I have to ask you a very direct question, and I don't apologise for doing that. Do you believe in the mission and vision of Westlake? And if you do, will you rise to this challenge and help us to address the problem that we're in the moment? And I want to ask you to do that in three ways. Firstly, by prayer. We will only survive this crisis through dependence on God. Make no mistake, we need God to intervene in a supernatural way, and that happens in response to the prayers of his people, and so will you pray. The second thing is, frankly, that more of us need to meet our God given responsibility to be always a proportion side of giving. To survive this crisis, more of us will have to give more and give more regularly. So, whatever that proportion of your income can be for you at the moment, I want to ask you if you will commit to giving it consistently. And finally, due to this COVID-19 crisis, we're in one of those sometimes a sacrifice situations. And so I would appeal to you that if you're able, would you be able to give a one off sacrificial gift to help us address the current situation and move towards being sustainable financially as a congregation? You can do all of those things right now. You can pray. In the email that you received, there's a link to the giving page on our website, and you can go right there and give to the church. But I think all of us need to do all that we can to ensure not simply that we have a future as a church, but that the future has a Westlake as a church.